Okay, this is very weird. Apparently, Jean François appears as Jesus Lozano Fernandez for whatever reason. So this is very confusing. I have actually 6 people connected as Jesus Lozano Fernandez. So it's been a very interesting experience. So who is who? Jean François. Okay, there we go. Now, finally.
Hello, this was a very interesting experience. The last thing I got this, you have some competing cluster. When you don't type the good login, they tell you, you don't exist, go away. I had the same feeling with Zoom right now. It's a very humbling experience. Well, so please call me Jesus from now on. And yes, I'm ready to start anytime. I'm gonna try the share screen. That's really
Thank
funny.
you, Jean François.
So, do you see well my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So I'm here today to introduce you a little bit about PCI, Peer Community In. So I assume several of you know already about it, but maybe not everyone. And to give you an overview of the process, and hopefully to convince you to submit preprints and become part of this adventure. So there's been several papers, both in everyday press, but also in scientific journals, suggesting that the peer review system, as we know it currently, associated to traditional journals, is broken. It has many flaws and problems. Some say it's the worst way except all others. So it paraphrases some famous historical quote. But I mean, there are undoubtedly some problems with peer review as we know it. Here I outline a few of these problems. One that is not true in every field, but at least in biology is often the case. It's inherently asymmetrical. Like as a reviewer, you know the author's identity, but they don't know your identity.
Jean François, yes? Sorry to interrupt. Someone is asking if you could use the presenter's view.
Sure. Is it better like this?
We are seeing still the same. I don't know how.
Okay, I'm using it's a PDF, so I'm using Acrobat Reader. Let me see. Read mode, maybe. Is this one better?
A little bit, I think.
A little bit, yes.
Maybe I can try something like this. Does it look better now?
I think so. This is perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So as I was saying, I'm often bothered that in biology, it's an asymmetrical relationship. So I personally always sign my reviews, but not all reviews do that. So in that case, it's an asymmetrical process. Of course, there's some double-blind review, especially in social science journals, and there's some open review process, but it's still a minority of the case in our fields. Although the review is a non-transparent process, after the process is finished, first, the whole review is not available to readers and to people interested in the paper, but also even the tiny details of the process are not communicated to the authors. You can have, for instance, some private comments of the reviewers to the editor of the journal that you will never know about, and that sometimes weigh a lot in the decision process. It's a slow process. As you all know, it can take months or even years sometimes for the review process to reach a decision. It costs a lot of money for everyone. I mean, usually either authors, in the case of open access journals, or readers have to pay to access the articles, sometimes both. Sometimes it's a subscription journal, but on top of it, the authors pay money to make this journal open access, which is like double spending of money. It's very wasteful as a system because many results don't get published because the journals are becoming incredibly picky about what they consider to be significant and sensational. So negative results, for instance, often don't get published. And then other people redo the same experiment again to get no result again and again. So it's the waste of resource. And one may argue it's also an undemocratic process because ideally this whole review system should be handled by scientists for scientists, but especially in the most prestigious journals nowadays, the person in charge of handling the review process and making the final decisions are usually not practicing scientists. There may have been scientists at the beginning who quit doing science and focus on the publishing business. So it's a different trade, and they are not really scientists, sensu stricto. So a possible solution is given to us by preprint servers. So you all know Archive and more recently bioRxiv. And they alleviate most of the problems mentioned above, but they are not peer-reviewed. So how can we plug an open, transparent, and unbiased peer review system into the preprint ecosystem with the aim of reaching consensual, open, and non-biased decision. So one solution that I would like to present you today is peer community in short, PCI. So how does it work? So the idea is you deposit your manuscript in a preprint server instead of submitting it to a journal. So this may be archive, bioarchive, or several other options I will tell you afterwards. And this gives you a proof of anteriority. So if it shows that at this given date, that was the way your data was structured and your results. So you can use it afterwards to show that you were the first one to have a given ID, for instance. And you can revise your paper on the go. So sometimes you may have a very interesting result, but you want to do some complementary experiments. If you wait to have these complementary experiments performed, you may lose this anteriority. Here you can give already the proof of concept paper and enrich it with complementary experiments as you revise it. And then when you're happy about your version that is complete, you can submit it to a PCI instead of sending it to a journal. And then your article will be submitted to community peer review in an open process. So the way it happens is each PCI has a group of what we call a recommender that will be informed of the new preprint that the author would like to get reviewed in that way. And usually the first recommender who is interested in the paper accepts it. And then he sends the paper to some selected reviewers as well. And together with his comments and reviewer comments, write a recommendation. And everything, the recommendation text plus the reviews are published on the PCI website with a link to the original preprint. And interestingly, these recommendations and the reviews are also searchable and can be cited as a publication because you have a DOI associated to it. And then finally, it is not compulsory. Once your paper becomes a validated article, peer-reviewed, you may still want to submit it to a journal if you want. It's not compulsory, but in some cases, it may be nice indeed to have the final prestigious acceptance by a journal on the cherry on top of the cake, let's say. So as you can see, open science at the very core of this system. So it's an open access publication web, but we also insist on having open data, open code, and open peer review. And what's starting to appear in PCI now is pre-registration of studies. So it's mostly the case now in PCI ecology. But in principle, nothing impedes this to open other fields. So the idea here is you deposit your experimental plan on what you plan to do before you do the study. It's also a way to prevent subtle psychological bias, like you reinterpret your hypothesis at the end in light of what you know already as a result. Here, if you deposit it in advance in a transparent fashion, which were your starting hypothesis, it solves a lot of problems associated with statistical analysis in case when people revise our hypothesis on the go. So if you're interested into this pre-registration, you can find a link at the bottom of my presentation. You can find it also some detailed explanation about it because it's a bit of a complex process on the peer community in website. So there's one current issue we're trying to solve. For preprints, bioarchive, which is the most popular server for biological preprints nowadays, it currently displays a sentence stating that this article is a preprint and has not been certified by peer review. And this also applies to preprints recommended by PCI, unfortunately. So we are trying to solve this issue because it's very paradoxical that a preprint that has been subjected to peer review and recommended still bears the mention this article has not been certified. But in the meantime, if this bothers you, you should select maybe another open repository. There are now plenty of repositories. Archive, for instance, doesn't have such mention on its website. And you have also a bunch of other ones, OSF preprint, Zenodo, HAL. Some universities may also have some repository available. So here's a list of existing PCIs. There's a whole number of them. I'm particularly interested myself in the peer community in genomics, PCI Genomics PCI, in which Rosa is also involved as a board member. And so you see there are 11 PCIs nowadays. If you look at the number of recommendations, so PCI EvolBio for evolutionary biology is the oldest and has already recommended more than 100 articles. And then you can see there's a nice correlation with the age of the PCIs, ranging from 55 and down to 3 for PCI ecology. And then you have a bunch on the right of brand new PCIs, which are not yet recommended articles, even though there are several in process, for instance, for PCI Genomics. So yeah, it's on the way. And you may wonder where a preprint in your field, so in comparative and comparative genomics and phylogenomics may end up. Well, I mean, they could end up in many of these different places. If your preprint has more for evolutionary biology perspective, maybe PCI EvolBio is legitimate PCI, or PCI Genomics if you're more focus on maybe functionalities and comparison if it's a really strongly genomics paper. You may also send it to PCI ecology if it's about evolutionary genomics. Ancient DNA paper could go to PCI, paleo, or archaeology. And you can see two PCIs here that looks quite closely related, PCI animal science and PCI zoology. Here's the nuances. If papers deal with wild animals, there are rather channels toward PCI zoology, whereas PCI animal science is more about farm animals and animals that are raised by humans, like cattle, for instance. Okay. So some latest news about PCI. So there's a new newsletter published a bit like every 2 or 3 months. This is except from the 6th May issue. And you can see now, so we are about a total of 154 recommended articles. That was in 6th of May. So you can see the number of registered users and registered recommenders, over 1,000 people who have already manifested their availability to recommend papers. We are supported by 50 organizations. And I will come back to this point at the end, it's quite important. And there are also PCI-friendly journals that already stated that if a preprint is accepted in PCI and then submitted to the journal, they will not go through a whole review process again. They will just take advantage of the available reviews online. So you can completely reverse the process I mentioned, get first a recommendation through PCI, and if you still feel you want acceptance in the traditional journals, then your preprint can end up published as well in one of these traditional journals without having to redo the whole peer-reviewed process. One latest news I myself discovered when I was preparing this presentation, there is now a nice template for formatting recommended articles that is made available to authors once their the recommendation of the paper is accepted and finalized. So you may want to use this nice template and give a distinctive PCI look to your paper afterwards at the end of the process. In that case, you submit the first version of your preprint, then most probably some revisions on the go, and the final product can be encoded using this particular template with the name of the particular PCI. It looks like a journal. I was about to say journal, but the particular PCI in the very top. And then, yeah, so maybe now you wonder how you can help with this wonderful experiment in publishing. Well, one very important step that can benefit yourself as well as the system is to ask your university, your graduate school, your research institute to officially support the PCI system. Here you see limitative list. I mean, there's many more, but that's some of the main and first institutions that decided to support the PCI system. What does it mean concretely? It means, for instance, that in this institution, peer-reviewed preprints are given the same weight as papers in peer-reviewed journals for PhD defenses, for instance, for evaluation committees for promotion. So that's a very important step that gives weight to all this process. Of course, I recommend that you keep informed. So I showed you the newsletter, which is on the PCI website, and there's a Twitter account to follow if you're into this sort of things. And of course, you're very welcome to join one or several PCIs that I recommend. Please don't be shy. We're aiming for a non-biased representation of the scientific community. So if you're still a student, but you would like to contribute, you can also propose yourself. And of course, please submit preprints for recommendation. I finish here and I welcome any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean François.
Yeah.
We have some time for questions, perhaps. Okay, so I'm having a look at the Slack channel. Samuel Abalde is saying, 2 days ago, there was a pretty interesting debate on Twitter regarding if PCI evolutionary biology should actually brand itself as a journal instead of a repository of peer-reviewed manuscripts. PCI evolutionary biology answer was, the best in our opinion is to do as if Per Community In was a journal. I am wondering why this reluctance of the label journal. There are not preprints anymore. And he's attaching links to the Twitter comments for everyone to have a look.
That's a very good question. I mean, I myself find that the limit between a journal and a PCI is kind of a shadow zone. I mean, I had this debate and discussion myself with the founders of PCI, the whole PCI system. They are very adamant that it's not a journal. Their argument for that is that, yeah, they want it to be really completely separate from the traditional publishing system. But I agree, especially with a template for formatting that give, it's a corporate look to the PCI paper if you choose to reformat your final preprint using the template provided. It looks to me a bit similar to a journal, but a journal that would be without any fees, completely managed in an open, democratic, and bottom-up way by the community. So maybe, yeah, I mean, the definition of a journal is not an easy way. There are these overlay journals, for instance, that feed on articles published as preprint and publish them in giving them an ISBN and journal name. Maybe at the end, it boils down to the fact that PCI doesn't have any ISBN number. So administratively, officially, it's not a journal, but yeah, it's a question of definition. I agree. It's an interesting point.
And perhaps another question, since we had a little bit of a rough start, we can dedicate a little bit more of time. Alejandro Lopez is asking, do you think that these or similar initiatives could actually replace one day the journal system for publishing?
Well, I mean, that's an idea. Of course, it looks so much more efficient, unbiased, and democratic way of proceeding. But yeah, we could totally imagine at some point switching to a PCI-only system, PCI or similar systems. I mean, there are already some researchers who don't bother anymore submitting paper to traditional journals. They just publish a preprint on bioRxiv or Archive and just let the public read it. It's usually researchers who have a lot of prestige in the field, so they don't feel the need to prove anything anymore. That's why the peer review system has been added, like PCI, to provide a more secure ecosystem for young researchers who don't have yet this prestige in the field to get validation by their peers. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, this could work as a replacement for traditional journals. I agree.
Thank you so much, Jean François. There are more questions on Slack. Please feel free to answer them there. Okay, so thank you everyone for being here today with us, particularly during the last part where we were playing Who's Waldo in Zoom. And everyone was called Jesus Lozano Fernandez suddenly, so it was really, really stressful.
And but, for the real Jesus Lozano Fernandez, was still more like it was crazy. So many people like me. Oh, that's a nightmare.
Yeah, so I suggest tomorrow everyone changes their names to Jesus Lozano Fernandez, and then we have a lot of fun. Again, thank you all for being here today. Thank you, François. Thank you, all the speakers of the 2 sessions. Please remember that tomorrow we have 2 other sessions. We have a session on methodological advances in phylogenomics, a session about, well, with talks of PhD students, and a special session on gender issues. So please be here with us again, because there's a lot more. And Jesus, could you like to add something?
Yeah, nothing.
The real Jesus.
The real Jesus is saying that it has been a pleasure to be here. I enjoy a lot the talks. I'm looking forward for tomorrow. So thanks again for being here, and I hope to see you all tomorrow.
Thank you, guys. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.